So like if you have a tunnel, they have detectors set up so they can detect microwaves. And they can detect microwaves going in on one side, and then in the middle, the detectors seem to think there's no microwaves there at all, and then suddenly the microwaves can just appear on the other side. And like that's similar to a space-time wormhole in the sense that from an outside perspective, if there was a wormhole a kilometer that way and the other opening was a kilometer that way, somebody would walk in and come out the other side, and we would have no idea. We would feel no gravity difference, nothing, that anything had entered or exited the other side. And so, what do these type of wormholes have to offer us for technology right now? Potentially some invisibility tech. That would be kind of cool if they can make instead of microwaves be visible light. And also MRI machines, a little bit more practical. So currently, if you probably know what an MRI machine is, you go inside a really small confined space, and they have a huge electromagnet that turns on and scans your body. So big magnets induce a lot of current, and so any kind of metal inside will get very, very hot. So you can't have metal inside of MRI machines, which is a little bit of a problem because that means you can't scan while you operate. You have to scan the person's body, see what's wrong, and then the doctors have to look at the scans to try to operate. But with this, you could potentially essentially hide those tools from the MRI. So you could be operating on the patient while you're also scanning them at the same time, which is a really cool concept. Next slide. All right, the other idea is warp drive, since it looks like wormholes are a little bit off for us currently. So warp drive is faster than light speed travel, and this idea came up in Star Trek a long time ago, those of you who have seen the show. And so the idea is essentially to have, rather than have your spaceship travel through space itself, it instead warps space around the ship. So it'll contract the space in front of the ship and expand the space behind the ship. And theoretically this is possible, which is good. And there's a couple ways of going about doing this. So first off, you do it with what's called exotic matter. And exotic matter is this really weird substance, pretty complicated, but we've only been able to create it in very, very small quantities in labs, and it doesn't exist for very long, which is, microseconds. And the problem with exotic matter is to move a spaceship at over light speeds, you would need the equivalent mass of exotic matter of about 10 times the mass of the visible universe. Which is a little bit out of our reach, since we can only make tiny, like infinitesimally small amounts. The other approach is using dark energy, which is the stuff that is it's the leading theory on why the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate. Because typically we think of mass likes to attract to each other due to gravity, but instead our universe is expanding. So dark energy is the leading theory on why that's happening. And it turns out you would only need the equivalent mass of dark energy, about the mass of Jupiter, which is much less than the visible universe, which is good. But the problem with dark energy is that, unlike exotic matter, we have not been able to create it in labs. We have not observed it anywhere. It's all just theoretical. Theoretically it could exist, and we hope to observe it sometime in the next actual couple of years. But we have not found any so far. So, what does this mean for humanity? Well, a lot of things like warp drive, wormholes are probably pretty far off as of right now, so we should probably try to focus on what we can do right now for this planet.
Thank you so much. We went over problems on Earth that we could try to fix, and then once that kind of doesn't work out, we looked at what space could do for us, and then once we found what we wanted in space, we went over how we could get there. Thank you so much for listening in.
Do we have it here?
Did you want to show a brother?
Alright, hello, my name is Jevin.
And my name's Christina.
I'm Sasha.
And I'm Kalina, and Susan unfortunately cannot be here today.
So today our group is here to talk about the digital revolution in our world, specifically the consequences of connecting to the world at large. So, first of all, we wanted to address the science fiction implications of it in a topic that we lovingly titled Sci-Fi to Wi-Fi. How has science fiction predicted present and future societal trends? Go ahead. So, first we want to address the baseline understanding that communication is a two-way street. So platforms like YouTube and Skype and Facebook, social media, interaction online, these are all voluntary actions. We are not being coerced by society in a direct way to make these things and make accounts for YouTube, Skype, Facebook, etc. However, it is generally in our best interest to do so, and so we make that decision. It is not something that we are indentured or required to do. However, government surveillance as a whole is involuntary. We did not enter into specifically American citizenship with the intent of signing a contract that says we are allowed to monitor you, we are allowed to watch you. And it's funny because we really wouldn't know anything about this topic, government surveillance as a whole, were it not for the discoveries of a man by the name of Edward Snowden in 2013. It's worth noting that without Edward Snowden's contributions to society and without his following exile to Russia, we would not have known that we were being watched. We would not be talking about this right now. We would all have no idea or inkling of any sort of government surveillance currently ongoing. In January 2014, Snowden spoke out on his situation, stating that there is no saving an intelligence community, referencing the CIA and the NSA, that believes that it can lie to the public and this legislators who need to be able to trust it referencing the community, the community, and to regulate its actions. So, in 2013, Edward Snowden whistled to and leaked a series of government surveillance protocols that were being utilized by the NSA and the CIA to spy on American citizens. One of the most damning of these security protocols was known by PRISM. It allowed direct court-approved government access to Americans' Gmail and Yahoo accounts. Anything you ever sent or received, attachments, text bodies, etc. Even the subject fields and the addresses of those you were talking to were then accessed directly and stored into private databases. Not even World of Warcraft is safe. For those of us who were avid gamers growing up, games such as World of Warcraft, Second Life, games where you were allowed to create an avatar and to interact with the world anonymously, those platforms were rife with government agents making their own accounts. You can just imagine like a row of government employees all playing World of Warcraft, and their goal is literally to track down potential security threats, as they believe that video games could be used as a platform for terrorist threats and various national security threats to reach out anonymously to recruit Americans and to make plans in exchange of money. So, moving forward, wait a minute, where's the sci-fi here? You know, we discussed how sci-fi predicted these things. How did it do that? So, George Orwell wrote a book more than half a century ago by the name of 1984, in which a man by the name of Winston Smith was once a low-ranking member of the government of the setting known as the Party. Eventually, he discovered the truth, and the truth being that the government was working to quash all individuality by enforcing strict laws and privately surveilling everyone in terms of like they would know your actions, your location, the words you say, as well as your thoughts. In fact, thinking rebellious thoughts or illegal thoughts was considered one of the most heinous crimes of all. It was called by the name of thought crime. So he discovers the truth. He fights the system. He purchases a diary, starts writing down his thoughts privately. He has an illicit affair. He breaks the law on numerous counts, but he fails. He fights the system and loses. He is captured and he is brainwashed back into submission and becomes a conforming member of society again. Now I would like to compare that in its entirety to Edward Snowden's story, and you will find that they are almost item for item the same. The truth is discovered. Edward Snowden whistleblows, and the entire world is now aware of the truth behind American government surveillance. He fights the system. He speaks out. He records himself in various video conferences with news facilities and reporters around the world. And he just stands by this firmly until finally he faces the consequences of said actions. He seeks political asylum, and he has been in Russia for the better part of this decade. So, move forward. However, the differences between the two, science fiction and real life, are equally terrifying. Unlike Winston Smith in 1984, we have more than one government party to deal with in our daily lives today. Mega corporations like Amazon and Apple and Google are all lobbying to receive our information and use that information to, well, for convenience sake, really. You know, they have access to our credit card info, they have our address, you know, for Amazon Prime, they can ship to our address. You know, they get this information from us and we voluntarily give it to them. However, that information, where is that going? They have all of this information and we don't even know anymore to what extent they control and understand parts of our lives. And our peers and neighbors even, you know, people film others and their friends on social media. That video is sent to whoever they sent it to, but the facilitator, so like Snapchat, Instagram, they have access to all of that. They know what we have sent to our friends, our family. So our information is not safe. There's quite literally nowhere to hide in this world that can prevent us from being watched by someone above. Finally, as connectivity grows, the amount of information being disseminated amongst the third party grows as well, which leads us to wonder, is being connected to the world at large worth it at all?
So on to the subject of security. How is security affected by increasing connectivity, and how is this increasing connectivity to our advantage or disadvantage? So as of now, as the present, we have linked most of our accounts, such as our bank information to Amazon to other social media sites, possibly, and social media sites to other information banks and servers. But in the future, such as what Jenna mentioned with the sci-fi, everything is connected. They aren't within their own private sectors, such as the security sector, the law sector, and other sorts. They're all connected together in some form of way in which they become just a giant web. So they're onto insecurity and security. With companies such as large corporations, Amazon, Apple, and those large mega corporations, they typically do not prioritize security. When they ask their employees, they usually want, how much profit are we going to get from this item? How much is it going to take to produce this item? Their first train of thought isn't really how secure is this going to be and how will the public security of this item. That's where the low-cost devices come in. When you say in the future they come up with a smart microwave for whatever reason, and that is connected to a network. If that device is insecure, that could potentially be a door for anyone to access within your network. This is an example of an infiltration through Facebook. The recent Facebook hack where about 30 million people were affected. And this was done through access tokens, which basically store your information into a giant server. And whenever you log in, it saves it for you. Unless you're incognito, but still most people go into their own web browsers however they wish. They don't prioritize security either, which makes for both sides. What was still taken from this Facebook infiltration was your search history, your locations, your check-ins, and although other information wasn't taken like financial information, this is still very important. This is an important issue to discuss. Yes. But there are advantages to connectivity. Say this is an example of a wireless monitoring system where those that would typically require a nurse or someone to take care of them or monitor them, usually they'd be able to connect to a device connected to a server or their phone, for example, so that should anything happen to them, the device would be able to call for help. But even with these advantages, such as our information being shared everywhere and the convenience of it all, what is at risk exactly? How much do they know about us? Who can access our information? And what exactly is at risk? And what is placed? Because the risk is that whatever is placed out onto the internet stays there. And should this information, your health information and social security number, banking information is placed out on the web for everyone to see, how would that affect you?
So this takes us to unveiling surveillance. So Susan wanted to find out how much information do internet-based services collect from us. There's this really like interesting service on Google called Google Takeout, where you can pretty much download all the data Google has on you. So Susan did this, and she found out that Google knows all her connected apps, like things you connect your Google account to, like Spotify, YouTube, things like that, and purchases, like what you purchased on Amazon, and they also know like her Airbnb reservation, the exact address, the time she checked in, the time she checked out, like how many guests were there. And then for emails, they keep track of even your deleted emails and pretty much like every email you've sent. For photos, they keep a track of like every photo you've uploaded on Google Drive, even if you do delete them. Phone details is all the contacts and messages sent and received. And locations, they know where you are all the time, including what you were doing. Like sometimes they would say like getting out of a car. One of them said like leaning. No idea what that means. But yeah, so they collect pretty much like all this information. And her main question was like, do they just collect data for the sake of collecting data? And personally, we all feel like this information, it's okay if it's between like us and Google, like a healthy relationship. But the thing is, they give this to third parties and they sell our data in order to like sell us ads and things like that. And this sometimes leads to privacy concerns like hacking, which ties back to your whole Facebook thing. So if your personal information is collected without consent, like that's it. You can't really take it back, it's out there. And the information that you put online because you assumed it would stay protected, which it would have, is now stolen by people you don't know for purposes you also don't know. And it's like really scary because like that's not what you signed up for. So the more data that online services collect from us, the more harmful each breach can be simply because of the amount of information they can get access to. So what exactly can we do to protect our personal information? Well, like what Jevin mentioned, how like communication is a two-way street, no one's forcing you to use these services. Like sometimes when you don't agree to the terms of service and like privacy policies, you can't use the app. And like if you still want to use Google, Facebook, and other social media but want to protect yourself, you can always be anonymous. But the problem is, especially in today's world where you want to be connected, you want to represent who you are and you don't want to just like put an anonymous face with like your fake birthday, etc., etc. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in the end, and the real question is like privacy versus convenience. I mean, we can all like debate about how much privacy, about how much we each value privacy, but the thing is like these services that Google, Spotify, Venmo, like that they provide are super convenient. So like if you want to use those apps, they're going to collect data on you. So what is important to you, the convenience or the privacy? And this leads us to the next one.
Right, so aside the privacy and security aspects of all these new technologies, we must consider the effects of them on our mind and just like our general health. So smartphones and so.
My name is Ariana.
My name is Gerslak.
My name is Sanjeev.
Unfortunately, Lisa Hedge couldn't be with us today. And this is surveillance, privacy, and the NSA. So what's going on here? Well, the US government has routinely collected metadata on the populace. Metadata meaning anything you posted online, any post on social media, any video you may have uploaded, anything that someone else may have said about you, they're collecting it and they're using it for their own purposes. They say that it's used for security and to protect the national interest. But when the FBI's general counsel suggests that the government needs to be able to monitor all internet communications, all of them, becomes slightly suspicious. So where should the line be drawn? Although the NSA's motivations may be justified, we shouldn't throw our privacy to the wayside. And so, as a group, we propose a push towards increasing the transparency of both the NSA and the private companies that collect it.
So, this is the background of the NSA and privacy and internet security. So, wiretapping is as a practice was first used in the 1920s. Basically, wiretapping is the practice of listening to a device like a telephone to secretly monitor a conversation. The government used this technique to monitor all of your calls, know who you're calling, and know the location of the caller. These tactics were used to enhance the government's ability to fight crime. On November 4, 1952, President Harry S. Truman created the National Security Act. It was responsible for funding global monitoring, collection, and processing of information data for counterintelligence purposes. To add on its list of duties, it also had to protect the United States communication networks and information systems. In order to do these duties to the best of their abilities, the NSA had to find numerous loopholes in the law in order to get the job done. In 2013, Edward Snowden leaked a classified document from the NSA database. Because of these leaks, the American citizens were distraught over what if the government was spying on them. About 52% of the Americans were worried about what the government will use these information for. And this goes to show that the citizens of the United States do not want their freedom stripped away just for the added benefit of extra security. Since Snowden leaked these informations, he was charged with theft of government property, unauthorized communication of national defense information, and willful communication of classified communication intelligence. The NSA collected phone metadata from major cellular networks, companies like Verizon, to collecting masses of data from a range of US internet firms like Microsoft and Google. The NSA used a program called PRISM, which basically gained a backdoor access to these top tech giants. However, since Congress passed the Patriot America Act in 2007 and the FISA Amendment Act in 2008, these top tech companies are immune to any legal damage. Even with all these proofs, many companies are denying any cooperation when handing over data. A quote from a representative from Apple says, "We never heard of any company called PRISM. We do not provide any government agency with direct access to our servers, and any government agency requesting access must get a court order." This goes to show that the companies will say whatever they want to get the users to trust them. And ever since then, there has been a debate on whether their actions are just.
On one end of the spectrum, some individuals believe that surveillance tactics that are used by the government are justified, and that overall a sense of security is worth sacrificing some of the American people's privacy. On the other side, many believe that individual privacy is much more important, and that such tactics are a violation of the population's privacy on a massive scale. Both sides of this argument have actually present very valid arguments and should be taken into consideration. But that begs the question, which should the government listen to? Ultimately, it should be up to the people to decide. So let's take a look at pro-privacy first. This is where individual privacy on a mass scale should not be sacrificed just to gain security. Critics say that wiretapping violated the Constitution's separation of powers, the Fourth Amendment's provision on illegal searches and seizures, and the FISA Act. Privacy supporters are stating that this information collection breaks many laws due to the way that it's conducted and used. Privacy has already started to disintegrate for many individuals. As a matter of fact, writer David Cole asserts that the digital era has brought us many delightful conveniences, but it has simultaneously created previously unthinkable dangers. The problem often lies with limited or no transparency in modern day society, which we will talk about later. For all we know is that we are being manipulated and controlled by the companies who are mining our data, analyzing it, and using it for their own, possibly malicious intent. Even our own government and entities cannot always be trusted to have our best interests in mind. With no regulations on what these agents can look at, who knows what kind of personal information they're able to use. On the other side, pro-security. This is when you sacrifice some privacy measures in order to protect the country and the greater good. Those who stand by this argument do so because there has never been a major terrorist attack in America since September 11 of 2001. In a way, it is our civic duty to protect our citizens and construct friction against crime as best as we can. By providing this information and allowing government entities to analyze it in a bulk, we can stop these horrendous acts of terror from ever coming back into existence. Such a perspective holds that why would we mind if our data is being used to stamp out the possibility of someone killing countless innocent people? Why are people worried about the government invading their privacy when they've been volunteering private information online for many, many years?
So So we've come up with a couple solutions to the problems we've presented. Knowledge is power, as according to Sir Francis Bacon, and with that knowledge, the government has power over us. And so our approach is to increase the transparency of the government and the data they collect from these private entities. We'd like to look at organizational goals on a larger scale, both of the government and of these individual companies, and we'd like to look at them on a larger scale and make sure that they make different and beneficial moral decisions if we all come together and do that. We'd also like to future-proof these regulations and any future mandates around data harvesting around every 4 years, every election or so, because with this increasing technology, this is where the problem stems from. Although these transparency policies shouldn't be the solution in full, we'd like to increase these regulations and make sure that these entities do not have that power over us. In conclusion, security advocates argue that it's necessary to give up some privacy, but not to the extent that it's happening today. We would like to approach this problem through multiple angles of approach and would allow more comprehensive eradication of the problem. We'd like the audience to stay educated on how your information can be used, because while knowledge is power, if you have the knowledge, you have the power. And so we'd like to encourage you to stay educated on your information and how it's being used. Only through mass public effort can we make sure that this message is being heard. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
How do you distinguish between information and knowledge?
Information and knowledge. I believe that information is more similar to data, whereas knowledge is something more inherent and real, closer to the truth. So while these companies are able to gather information, they can derive knowledge from that information.
Thank you.
I just want to say, I think this is really important, and I found out after my uncle died that he had been a member of the NSA because he was a mathematician at Caltech, and they used him to do probability stuff. And then his son, my cousin, had been going back and forth between when they were still in East Germany and West Germany, and they stopped at the border and they said, your dad tells you, this is long after he was supposed to have dropped out of the NSA, your dad tells you that you should stop doing this or you're going to get in trouble. So he, in other words, he was getting all this information about individuals all around the world and feeding in. And of course, if you've seen Snowden, you know how terrible that is, that they're even looking in on your laptops and stuff, cameras. But anyway, I just think the way too much information or whatever data is being gathered and on private citizens.
Yeah. I also believe that this cause is really important because, like you said, it's kind of impossible to know really what they're looking at. And it's impossible, at this point with the transparency policies they have in place, we don't know what they're looking at and we don't know how they're using it. And so they can do things like that, using personal data. He can check up on you, his daughter, and we would have no idea that that's even a possibility. But because they're doing this all behind our backs, that's the reason why we're pushing for transparency policies before anything else. Before we say, oh, you have to look at this data only, we need to know that they are looking at that data only. Because if they're using personal information, if they see someone's intimate photos and decide, I'm going to look at your entire life history because I like the way you look, because these agents have so much power and unrestricted power in that sense. It's really important that we engage and make sure as a country that we are engaging and making sure that transparency, especially for these types of organizations, is really important.
And also adding on to the fact that we don't know what exactly they're looking for, which permission we're giving. Like if we just look at an example, when we download an app from the Play Store, right, or let's say Instagram or anything, the app asks us directly, does Instagram have permission to use your camera, right? Exactly. So even do we have access to look at your phone calls or anything like that? The app asks directly, and this is what we've said, that how come we cannot have the same approach from the NSA where we directly know what we are giving to them and how are they going to use it?
Yeah.
And adding on to that again, with stuff like that, and each time it says, oh, can we use your camera, can we use the microphone, especially with stuff like Siri or Cortana or other things, or Alexa, that's just always there and always listening, even though it says, oh yeah, you have permission to listen to me whenever you want. We don't always want Siri listening to us. We don't always want Alexa listening to us, and we don't want the NSA to have access to that all the time. And so, at least if the NSA admits, hey, we are collecting this specific data, can we collect this specific data, then as a country, we know what they're doing with it.
Good.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, that just gives you time to set up.
Our presentation is about augmented reality. So first I started this presentation off by asking the audience if anyone knows what augmented reality is. Yes.
Oh, it's like you can see it here, and then there's like they track over here, and you can see something on your glass or whatever it is.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, you're pretty much right. So basically, what turns out is that people often confuse AR with VR, and so AR is adding like digital elements to a live view of what you're already seeing, usually through glasses or like a smartphone using the camera. Whereas VR is a complete submergence in a simulated world. We took a survey in our class, and only a few people took the survey, but even those people showed that they did mix those things up. So VR is more well known and widely used, but applications of AR are already seen today. This is an example of AR, where you can see that they're pointing at the camera and they're looking at their live view, but there's a digital element. Whereas this is someone using VR and they're completely submerged into a new world. So these are some examples of current AR, just like companies that are having some recent advancements. So Google and Amazon usually are the top ones. Yeah. So some video games. AR is very, very popular in video games, mostly through apps on a smartphone, like I said. Some ones that you guys should know is Pokemon Go. In 2016, it got very, very popular. And basically, it uses your camera and you walk around your neighborhood or anywhere all around the world to capture Pokemon. Another app that you can still download is called Ingress, where basically it's this whole plot and you have to walk around a neighborhood as well, but you find energy sources and you can control humanity or you can save humankind. And there's another game, pretty similar, but you can be a treasure hunter or a treasure protector. This one's full of like mystery and myths, and all three of these games they rely on your physical movements. So one good aspect I'd say of AR is that you need to roam around, and that's usually why these apps are on smartphones and not on a laptop. Yeah. Okay, marketing is another big area that uses AR. IKEA and Amazon currently allow you to visualize products in your own home through the use of AR. So you can point your phone, in the picture that I showed earlier, it shows furniture. So in an empty space of your home, you can pick, let's say, this table that you really like. You point your phone in that empty space and it shows you exactly what it would look like. I think it's genius, and you'll probably see it more and more. Also, AR business cards are a very good way of sharing information. You just point there's usually like an app that you have to download, but you just point it and then things come up. I have an example. Before I show you this video, I actually went to Trader Joe's not too long ago, right here in Santa Cruz, and on one of the wine bottles, it had on there, like on the little label, it had AR. And it said, like, you download the app, you point it, and you can see, like, this whole thing. Unfortunately, I couldn't download the app and try it out, but I was surprised to see that it's actually right there. So that just shows you how common it is. So now I'll show you this video.
Agent verified. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to share this information to everyone you know.
This is an example of VR, but
Virtual
within AR.
based augmented reality and virtual reality consultant. Our services cater to various industries, from product marketing, museum and youth exhibition, education, tourism, architecture, real estate, and so many more. Come to us. We can help you transform your business. Thank you for watching. We wish you good luck. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the positive aspects of augmented reality, and with the focus of medicine, gaming, education, and hyper reality. I left out other implementations such as piloting or assistance in a home. Say your fridge is not working and you utilize AR to guide you towards a solution. But yeah. So in the medical field, they'll be able to take MRIs and as opposed to viewing them in two-dimensional film, they will be able to pull them up three-dimensionally and utilize them during surgery. And another implementation will be practicing surgeries prior to performing them on a patient. And in the realm of gaming, the implementation of AR would be utilizing real household, say furniture in the first picture, where you can interact with your surroundings within the game, and yeah. So education. There was a study done by Edgar Dale that stated you retain 20% of what you read, 20% of what you hear, 10% of what you read, and 90% of what you do after 2 weeks. And this this theory is utilized within AR to project us from the intelligence age, from the digital age into an intelligence age, which means we have information but no way to process it into like retaining it. And through the use of AR, we're able to do and interact with diagrams in order to retain information better. And this is hyperreality. Hyperreality is the like full engulf of AR, and I have an example.
Voy lo más rápido que puedo. Seguro que no hay más trabajos disponibles. Estudio para ser profesora y estoy haciendo mercados.
Y además puedes quedarte con los puntos de fidelización. Eres una mujer afortunada. Tienes que confiar en la aplicación. Te sientes necesitada. Gracias. Chao.
¿Quién soy yo? No, eso no es lo que quiero decir.
No achievements.
¿Para dónde voy? No, puedo volver a empezar.
things too.
This is hyper reality. They're doing augmented, but this is the hyper. Oh, this is funny. It's awful.
Okay, I'd like to expand on how AR can benefit mobile marketing. First, it can improve brand recognition. In the top left corner, you see McDonald's is trying to promote their product, and everyone recognizes the M for McDonald's. But in here, it shows that AR, you can use it for entertainment purposes. Like, for example, this person is playing a mini soccer game while that's provided along with his meal. AR can also ease the experience. On the bottom left corner, you see a photo of a ketchup bottle, and basically you just hover your phone over it, and then suggestions like what kinds of meals you can prepare using ketchup will pop up, and then you could swipe left or right and choose which meal you want to use or make. AR can also improve personalization and expression. The top right corner is an app called Share a Coke. It's an augmented reality mobile app created by Coca-Cola. And basically you can personalize your own Coke bottle and share it among your friends. AR can also enhance content quality. So on the last photo, it basically shows that you can take your mobile device, scan an aisle like in a grocery store, and look up, oh, what are some items that are on sale? And then all these items will pop up saying, oh, this is discounted item or such and such. And here I just have a T-chart, which is like a rundown of the advantages and disadvantages of augmented reality. Advantages: reality with more information added to it that is normally not available. It blurs the line between what is real and what is computer generated, and information about the surrounding real world becomes interactive and digitally manipulable. For disadvantages, it lacks privacy, and people are missing out on what's right in front of them. For example, what Ashley mentioned about Pokemon Go. And it's also expensive to develop and maintain. The production of it is very costly.
Augmented reality is leading to an era of privacy where criminals simply point their phone at victims and learn anything they need to know about them. Okay, to get more in depth about Pokemon Go, I'm pretty sure many people recognize this gaming app. On the right side, it shows basically this screen pops up every time you use the application, and it just says that, oh, you have to be careful when you're playing this game because you're not aware of your surroundings. But despite that, everyone just like goes around at night, playing on the streets, and also people would also play while driving, causing several traffic accidents and even deaths. For augmented reality, gaming lets players capture Pokemon at real locations using their smartphones, but has real fears over dangerous trespassing, distracted pedestrians and cyclists, and criminals preying on unsuspected gamers. There is a Netflix British TV show called Black Mirror. Definitely recommend it. It's about 4 seasons. Every season's about 6 episodes. There's no continuity between every episode, but it basically shows how advanced technology in the future can affect society positively or negatively. Before I show this video, just letting you know, I did not censor it, so there's like a few curse words.
What's that?
Okay, that sounds
They call this a mushroom.
This one is called Playtest.
What'd you say?
Basically, she's implanted a mushroom at the back of his neck so he can
That's
see
like
his own eyes.
like a video game gopher. Is there more detail now? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And now? Holy fuck! Holy shit! You thought he's right? He's right. He's right. Okay.
He's not real. He's a sort of mental projection. You can see him. I can't.
You can't.
And this one is augmented socioeconomic rating system. Basically, it's a society where in order to survive, you have to be liked by other people, and you can give other people's ratings. And if you have a low rating, you're going to be looked down upon in society.
This is so sad.
You look great today.
Thank you.
Door won't open. I'm on 2-4.
Sorry, Chaz. I'm late.
I just need some stars, please.
And this is where a mother wants her child to not be able to see inappropriate content and like
Is your friend
blood or guns.
I'm just pairing it with Sarah's implant. Now, tap this icon here to relay her optic feed. This is what she's seeing now. That's right. Oh, it's okay. Look. See, the imagery causes a cortisol spike. And this
Filter on.
is what she sees and hears.
Spectral memory. You can get a Willow Green upgrade for less than the price of a daily cup of coffee and 3 decades of backup for free. Install in-brain procedure with local anesthetic.
Yeah, let's stop it, because that was the end of
This
the.
memory
Or
is
this is
living.
also considered complicated. Basically, you could recall memories that you had before and then bring it up again and then view it. Basically, he's looking at a previous interview to see whether or not he did it. It's augmented reality.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you.
So we've got time for questions? Is that okay? Let's give him a hand.
Does anyone have any questions?
Or comments?
The kind of world that these, video captures portray, would you like to live in such a world?
How we could theorize about saving the human race. I'm Andre.
I'm Colin. I'm Nick. I'm Andrew.
I'm Dalton. Just very quick, I want to wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all that kind of stuff, to us fellow students, good luck on finals next week. So saving the human race. So there are a lot of ways that we could do this. There are a lot of possibilities and theoreticals that we go through, but this is just all in kind of preparation for worst case scenarios. So we're going to start off with our first possibility, geoengineering.
Yeah, so in our process of assessing the future of the human race, it seems logical to begin where the human race itself began, so planet Earth, and that's why we're starting with geoengineering. One of the biggest problems threatening our planet right now is climate change. The rising temperature is a result of so-called greenhouse gases being released into the atmosphere. These gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane, trap heat that otherwise would have escaped into space. Already the global temperature has increased by about 0.8 degrees Celsius since the Industrial Revolution in 1880. And that might not sound like a lot, but to put it into perspective, a 1 to 2 degree drop ended up causing a small ice age, and a 5 degree drop was enough to bury large parts of North America under a thick layer of ice 20,000 years ago. Our current models predict 2 to 6 degrees Celsius rise in the next 100 years if current trends continue. This could raise sea levels by 1 or even 2 meters, drowning many island nations and large swaths of coastline all around the world. As you can see from the picture, for example, the United States has 24 million people currently living below the new water line in 100 years. And China has between 30 and 80 million people that are living below the water line as it could be in 100 years. So all those people would have to be moved. Also, due to the higher temperatures, there would be large heat waves, lower crop yield, stronger natural disasters. So it's no wonder that people have turned to geoengineering, looking for a technological solution to this problem. So what can we do? Well, there are a good number of smallish geoengineering solutions that probably wouldn't be effective enough to be worth doing. But there are a few solutions that people are seriously debating. One of these involves the injection of aerosol-forming substances, such as sulfuric acid, into the upper atmosphere to increase the proportion of incoming light that is reflected off the atmosphere. As you can see from the photo, more light is reflected off the little droplets in the atmosphere, which means less heat is being trapped by the carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases. With this solution, the temperature of the Earth could be reduced back down to what it was before the Industrial Revolution, again about that 0.7 or 0.8 degrees Celsius. This sounds promising, but there are multiple problems, the worst of which could include droughts and flooding in Asia and Africa, which would potentially affect billions of people and require evacuations of many. Another problem is that a permanent haze could form due to all the little droplets in the atmosphere, meaning you couldn't see out into space as easily. This is simply not ethically acceptable, in my opinion. Another solution that's being discussed is known as BECCS, or Bioenergy Carbon Capture and Storage. Essentially, this method involves growing large quantities of biomass, burning them to generate electricity, capturing the carbon dioxide that is released, and then storing it underground in geological reservoirs. This process is carbon dioxide negative, meaning it reduces the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is good because carbon dioxide is one of the gases that's heating up the planet. However, we would have to grow biomass on an area larger than India to offset less than a third of the current global emissions. This would spark a constant conflict between agriculture and biomass because, as stated before, there's lower crop yield and the population is still rising at a very quick rate. So this process is far less dangerous than the injection of aerosols into the atmosphere, but it would require the building of a huge amount of infrastructure. This would take time and money, meaning the solution is not an instant one, and it's not even guaranteed to be done before we need it. So, in conclusion, these solutions are untested and potentially very dangerous. They will be tested for the first time on more than 7 billion people, with somewhat unknown results. Many scientists believe that geoengineering solutions simply aren't feasible, that many of them simply involve too much risk to be ethically sound and could fundamentally change the way that we live on this planet, perhaps irreversibly altering even our societal structures. There are less uncertain solutions like the growing and burning of biomass, but these take a lot of time and money. So what can we do? What's next? Well, the remaining solution is the one that's perhaps obvious from the beginning. Stop producing as many greenhouse gases in as large quantities. If we act soon, there is still time to stop the worst of the damage. The struggle is to get everyone to agree to give up certain conveniences and change their habits. So, what if we can't reduce emissions? What if we can't come together and stop this problem? And the geoengineering solutions are just too risky to use. Well, as you're about to see, research into space and time may yet find a way to save the human race.
So now is the second section of our presentation, which is where we look to space. So we just went over what could happen on Earth and the possibilities that can happen here on Earth before we have to get to space. But worst case scenario, this is what would happen, and here is a pretty brief introduction to space by Nick.
Hi. So, space-time and the universe.
a perspective into the vastness of human potential, the universe, and the world unseen. Now, what do I mean by that? First and foremost, I would like for you to look at that number right there, 1.402 times 10 to the negative 20. What do you think that number represents? That would be the size of this planet, the planet you are standing around right now, your local universe, so to speak, relative to the size of the visible universe, being 96 billion light years in diameter. A ridiculous size that you cannot even begin to comprehend. Now, why am I bringing this up? It's to introduce the idea that there's so much potential on such a small scale. Now, it's very easy to look at the size of the universe and see a nihilistic, self-depriving oblivion, looking at it and saying, wow, I am completely worthless. But I would like to invite you into a more existentialist point of view, a more optimistic point of view. I would like to look at the potential of all of you. And I'm not talking about the potential to get an A on your finals, or Sasha's potential to get gains. No, I'm talking about the potential, the literal potential of every human and every atom in existence.
Yeah.
So just like there is a universe all around you right now, so to speak, of the millions upon millions of interactions, you know, what's going on in India right now, what's going on in Australia, that's a universe, so to speak, even though it's immensely small, as oxymoronic as that might sound relative to the real universe. There's a micro-universe. Every single atom in your body, every fiber of your existence comes from one origin. It's in a massive explosion called the Big Bang. Now, I would like to introduce the microverse. This is where the theoretical ideas that we will be exploring later on, such as wormholes and false vacuums, are introduced. It's where theory becomes reality and possibility. It's been said that it's the fiber of the universe in the realm of impossibility, where existential crises and utopia lie just beyond our reach. No, it's said that the universe could end at any given moment with a false vacuum. And at the same time, infinite energy is just around the corner. Now, all this potential is right there, right? Just like you have the potential to get an A in all your classes, but it's not there yet. Why? Well, simply put, lack of unity and focus. I would like to present this graph here on my left. This is a graph demonstrating nuclear fusion, a theoretical, well not theoretical, a literal producer of energy. It's the forge of the stars and the forge of every atom inside your body. Every atom inside of you and in this room around you came from the death of a star. In a somewhat cyclical cycle, you are essentially self-aware hydrogen atoms. So here you'll see, so the two biggest pushers for nuclear fusion were the now defunct Soviet Union and the United States of America. The blue line here represents maximum effective effort. What if we actually focused for once, right? Nuclear fusion would be right here. Unfortunately, actual funding has been rather disappointing, like my grades. Now, yeah, so we have the potential to access the forge of the stars and access this whole new realm of possibility, but we don't. Next slide, please. So I like to think that humans are kind of like hydrogen atoms. You know, do you think a hydrogen atom is aware that it's in a star? I don't think so. Just imagine, we're all little hydrogen atoms bubbling around in this vacuum of space. All we need is that little send. I like to believe that unity is the catalyst that will lead us to the future. Here in this photo here by Mark Miller, you can see a brain neuron and a visual representation of the visible universe. And I think that's an absolutely fascinating photo, seeing the visual similarities between these. So I would like to invite you to take a more existentialist approach and believe that you can become the change you want to see. And as Thomas Edison famously said, if we did all the things we are capable of, we would astound ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. So now that we know the realm of possibility and what we are capable of, I'm going to talk about where we should be looking and what we should be looking for. So I'm going to talk about exoplanets. If you know what an exoplanet is, then good for you. But for all of us that have to research it, an exoplanet is basically a planet that isn't in our solar system, an exo out of our solar system planet. And if we're going to kill the Earth, which is probably inevitable, we should probably look for a second home, an Earth 2.0, if you may. So what are some important things that we need to look for when we're looking for an exoplanet? The first is what I would like to call the habitable zone. And so the habitable zone is kind of like the Goldilocks spot for an exoplanet to exist, which would optimize human survival on that planet. So if you like to think about it this way, Earth is in the perfect habitable zone for our sun. But this may be different anywhere in other places, and I'm going to get to that later. But another thing that I want to focus on within the habitable zone are the existence of these three things. A is water, because we need water to live. 2 is an atmosphere, because an atmosphere needs to be present in order for there to be oxygen in the air. And 3, a rocky landscape, optimized for agriculture and settlements. So water is obvious, we need water to live. And 2 is atmosphere. Now atmosphere can be a little tricky because we're not specifically looking for an oxygen-rich atmosphere, we're just looking for an atmosphere. Billions of years ago, before humans were humans, the Earth's atmosphere wasn't actually oxygen. So we had a methane mix of gases in our atmosphere which later turned into oxygen. And we can, instead of exclusively looking for oxygen-rich exoplanets, we can look at these methane-rich oxygen, or methane-rich exoplanets as well. So that kind of broadens our search. Last is landscape. I already explained it. It's really good for agriculture and just settlement building in general. If you look at the graph, on the left-hand side are the planets in our solar system, where they are warm, all the way up to the green spot, which is the habitable zone, and all the way up to cold. If you see, you might be able to make out Earth right about there, which is in the middle of our sun's habitable zone, and all these planets in between are where they are in perspective to a habitable zone, basically. So all those planets in the middle, like Proxima b and Wolf 1061c, are in the realm of possibility for the habitable zone. And the bottom is just how far away it is from us. So other than physical attributes to these exoplanets, I want to look towards things like time and placement of these exoplanets. So as you may know, it takes, even though light travels extremely fast, it takes some amount of time for light to reach us here on Earth. And so if you look at planets that are light years away from us, we're actually looking at that star or planet from the past because it took so long for that light to reach Earth. And that's why time and place is so important, because we have to factor in these things like when they were happening or when we saw them at to determine if these planets are even still there or if they're livable still. The second thing I want to talk about is stars. So stars come in many different shapes and sizes. That means they burn at different temperatures, which can affect the habitable zone of every single exoplanet depending on its star. And so we're gonna try to look for not necessarily a star like our suns, but just one with a planet who is in that star's habitable zone. Sorry, that kind of got messy in my head. But yeah, so now that we know what type of planets we're looking for and where we should be looking, let's talk about how we can get there.
Alright, so we know exactly what we're looking for, or we know approximately what we're looking for, but somehow we have to get to where we want to go. Now, the nearest star to us, actually came back up the slide real fast, the nearest star to us, Alpha Centauri, is 4.24 light years away. It looks kind of like a small number, but once you actually know what a light year is, which we discussed earlier, it's a ridiculously long distance for us. The fastest we've ever traveled is coming back in through the atmosphere at about 25,000 miles per hour. Credit to Dalton on that fact for me. Thank you very much. In order to get to Alpha Centauri, 4.24 light years away, it would take almost 114,000 years at the top speed humans have ever gone. That's enough time for the human race to have evolved into a new species at that point. I don't know what we would turn into, but it's a crazy amount of time. So how are we going to get there if we don't know how to do that? Even Mars is 35 million miles away at its closest point. So that's exactly when it's lined up with us, the sun, its orbit's correct, everything's in place. So how in the world are we going to get to other planets in other solar systems that might support life if we can barely even get to Mars? So first we have to understand a couple of concepts. One, the holes of the universe. Right? On the top here we have a black hole. The image is from Interstellar, which is a fantastic modularity, which is infinitely dense matter. It's not an infinite amount of matter, it is matter in an infinitely small amount of space, hence infinitely dense matter. Gravity there is extraordinarily strong and bends space-time and light all at once. So if we were to look at it from a space-time perspective, it's actually physically bending space-time around it, which is a ridiculously complex concept. However, it does give rise to possibilities like wormholes.
It's been theorized that some people thought there were wormholes at the center of black holes, some people think there's wormholes in the sides if you will, of black holes. We don't really know. We can't go into a wormhole, or we can't go into a black hole and send information out at our given point. We're just going to get spaghettified, and then obviously we can't send data if we're dead, right? So, what are we looking for? Just a wormhole on its own. If you have a piece of paper and put 2 dots on it, right? Like a piece of paper, can I borrow this one? If you have a piece of paper and have 2 points on it, and you fold the piece of paper so the 2 dots are together, you are simulating a wormhole. Of course, wormholes in space are a lot more complicated than folding a piece of paper, but it's a similar concept. You're folding space and time to make 2 points almost in the exact location. If you were to go through a wormhole, to everyone else, it would seem like you were just teleporting into another place. For you, it would look like you're traveling through kind of like a weirdish tunnel thing, where light's bending around it because of the strong gravitational forces, but everyone else around you would not understand what's going on. If you had a wormhole from point A to point B, as you were traveling through it, nobody on the outside would be able to see where you are. It would look like you just disappeared completely. We'll get to that in a little bit for lab-created wormholes, but that's what the space-time wormhole would look like. We would need something like this, a bend in space-time, or we would need to manually bend space-time in order to get to these planets that are ridiculously far away.
Alright, so I'm just going to give a little bit more on wormholes for a second. So Albert Einstein and this guy named Nathan Rosen originally theorized wormholes in 1935 after Einstein's general theory of relativity. And here we are a little over 80 years later, and we still have yet to discover any wormholes or space-time wormholes. I'll be getting to that. But physicists predict that if they could find wormholes, that they'd be incredibly small, really hard to keep from collapsing, and there are also some physicists predict that if you were to try to put any type of matter through them, they would cause them to collapse, which is obviously a problem because everything we know and love is made of matter. I'm going to talk about what kind of wormholes we actually do have right now. Unfortunately, they are not space-time wormholes as we want them to be, but instead we've been able to create electromagnetic wormholes in a lab in Barcelona a couple of years ago. And so what does that even mean? What is electromagnetism? So down there I have electromagnetic spectra. So